All right, we will call to order the Safety and Public Works Committee meeting, October 3rd, 2022, 7 p.m. in council chambers. We have 7 items on the agenda. First of which is event street closure application for Shriners Turkey Run. Jesse Dean, City Engineer, Public Works Director, if you want to take us through that one.
Good evening, councilors. Yep, so this is a very typical annual 5K run held on Thanksgiving morning from 8 to noon. This event's a little bit changed. It looks like in the previous years they haven't done street closures. They are proposing a street closure this time of Wright Street between 10th and 13th. But generally the route will follow a route that they've used in the past with 10th, 11th, Wright, Industrial, a little bit through the county fairgrounds. So very similar route to previous years. We are recommending approval under the condition that they request their traffic control probably about a week ahead of time. Signs are moved after the event, and then insurance is submitted ahead of the event.
All right, looks like the same thing as most years.
Yes, sir.
Any questions, comments, motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd move to approve the application as requested with the 3 conditions as specified. Request traffic control, removal of signs and banners, and insurance certificate submitted to the city.
I would like to second the motion.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, go to a vote. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Second item is a cooperative agreement with Minnesota DNR for the Lum Park boat access. Mr. Dean, if you want to walk us through that one. Go ahead.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So this is a kind of a continuation of some work that was done previously. So staff last December brought this before the park board. Essentially, this is a cooperative agreement with the DNR to replace some of the planking at the boat launch over at Lum Park at the landing. Most of the agreement states that the DNR will take care of replacing the planks at their cost, and I believe they're intending to do that with their forces. The only thing that the city is going to really be responsible for is providing any aggregate or gravel backfill should they need it. But they are intending to get this done maybe about spring ahead of the State Park Road account project that we have coming up next year to rebuild Lum Park. So this is something that they're thinking they want to get ahead of it.
Excellent. Any comments, questions?
Get a really quick comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we get to a motion, but this is actually, sorry, I know we're trying to move along. The other land, the Mississippi Landing Trail, any movement from the DNR on the actual discussion on the landing there?
I believe that permit was approved
Okay,
for construction of that one.
all right. Sorry, getting off course. Thank you.
No.
Only one comment from me. Looking through the contract language, section 2, subsection B, and I'm sure this will be covered in the proposed one spec language, but it might be good just to make sure that we've got language that that ensures all aspects of the project will be completed, leaving no aspects of the project in conditions worse than prior to the project. Fairly obvious and straightforward, but without it, don't want to get caught. That being said, I motion to approve the co-op agreement with Minnesota DNR for Lum Park water access replacement, while also asking that city staff work with the DNR on repairs in advance of the upcoming Lum Park Road project.
All right.
Second.
Motion and second. Any more discussion? Yeah, I think the DNR is pretty picky about how they leave things, so I wouldn't worry about that.
I wouldn't worry
part
about it too much either, but
All right. Any more discussion? Hearing none, go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item, NP Center Trail Project Final Settlement and Release Agreement. This was a closed session item last week, or 2 weeks ago, with Mr. Dean regarding the settlement with Mr. Higgins to complete our contract. If you want to walk us through anything quickly, Mr. Dean, go ahead.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So this agreement was prepared by the City Attorney Langle. Mr. Higgins requested that in lieu of completing about roughly $19,000 to $20,000 worth of punch list work. He requested that we do not perform that work, that he be compensated for $20,000 of gravel that was used on the project, and that he would allow us to just close the project out. When he reviewed the agreement, he agreed with it, and has since supplied us with the signed version for your review.
Excellent. Any more questions?
No, Mr. Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of the final settlement and release agreement as presented and the issuance of $20,000 payment to Mr. Higgins for reimbursement.
I second.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none. Go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item number 5 is a discussion on the North 3rd Street sidewalk. This was a project that was supposed to happen, I believe, this year, and got pushed back to next year, maybe for a good reason. We're going to talk about the sidewalks that we're going to get removed, and we have had a request. Well, I'll let you fill everybody in, Mr. Dean. Go ahead and walk us through.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So this is more specifically on North 3rd Street, between Washington Street and the hospital is what we're talking about in this segment here. There's varying segments of sidewalk on this corridor. So right now there is a partial segment on the block between Washington and Kingwood. It's either going to be left in place or replaced or installed through the project. Kingwood and Juniper does not have sidewalk, and it will not have any as currently proposed in the project. Between Juniper and Ivy, only north of 418 has sidewalk. It was currently planned to be removed as part of the project. And then finally, between Ivy and Holly, there is sidewalk there currently, and it was planned to be replaced or left in place as part of the project. So like you mentioned, as a request, we did review this. So looking at the segments, I provided about 4 different options how you can address the sidewalk along this corridor. Essentially, option 1 would be leaving the plans unchanged, continuing to move forward with removing the half block of sidewalk between Juniper and Ivy. And I included a few pros and cons for both. Option 2 would be to adjust the plans to leave the existing sidewalk on the north half of that block to the best extent feasible, which essentially kind of leaves it in place with the exception of maybe a tie-in here or there for driveways and new catwalks. Option 3 would be to leave that half block and then actually extend that block all the way down so the entire block between Juniper and Ivy would have sidewalk on that side of the street. And then the final option would be to not only extend that single block, but make the connection through the next block between Kingwood and Juniper, which does not have current sidewalk now, and that would make that connection all the way to Washington on the east side of the street. The first 2 options have generally not much for any financial impact. Obviously, the sidewalk extensions, I put together just a rough estimate based on removals, sidewalk installation, potentially some trees and shrubs that would have to be removed as part of the project. So of all those options, obviously extending the sidewalk an extra block and a half is the most expensive of the 3 at roughly about $21,700. And we would refine that estimate to put together a little bit more of a formal change order if that was the option that the committee approves.
Excellent. So surprisingly affordable for a project that is in scope $3 million?
It's the whole project itself is about $3.9 million.
$3.9 million, so closer to $4 million. $21,700 to extend our sidewalk system in North Brainerd, which is a great place for sidewalks, in my opinion. Mr. Hastings?
First off, I apologize.
Sorry, I got to have you come up to the microphone. You just got to state your name and address first, and then, is the microphone on? There's a little button on the front of it. Good?
My name is Chris Hastings. I live at 422 North 3rd Street. I do have to apologize. There was a proposal to come to a hearing on this project probably 6 months to a year ago, and I just dismissed it. I didn't think there was anything that would affect me aside from the street being torn out. Obviously, the sidewalk is going. And the sidewalk, there's a couple things. As I understand it, Ivy, which is on the northern side of the street, just directly south of Essentia Health or the hospital, is being removed. So having that sidewalk there is another corridor, and part of Essentia Health's fitness plan is to have they encourage employees to walk. So you see nurses out walking during their breaks and stuff like that. So I think having the sidewalk in is really important from that standpoint. The other really important thing is my neighbor behind me, Bill Matthews. His son lives with him and takes him out for walks once, twice a day, 3 times a day?
Once for sure. 3 would be great.
All right, but it's nice for them to be on the sidewalk versus on the street. So whether or not you decide to do the lower section, I'm ambivalent. Do you end up assessing the property owner for half of that then, or does the city pay the bill?
I believe the sidewalk is 100% city.
Oh, all right. That'd be great if it was extended, but I guess I'd just like to have it in front of us. I guess that's more shoveling and snow blowing for us, but we like the sidewalk. So thank you for having us. Any questions?
Yeah, come on up. Just name and address before you make your comments, please.
I'm Jim Matthews, 418 North 3rd Street. So we have the house where the sidewalk ends. Yep. We moved from Northeast Brainerd to this house in 1964 or 65. There's never been an extension from our house to the corner, but since we moved in, they've been telling us for years, going back to the 60s, that they would finish that sidewalk. And I know it was important for my mom, Evelyn Matthews, who has passed away, but Mom pushed really hard for it because she had a heart condition and had to get out and exercise all the time. So what happens is you walk out of our driveway and then you got to walk on the street. And she had an episode where, because of the unevenness and the little baby potholes, she fell and knocked herself out and knocked a couple teeth out. So it was always important for her, and she always fought for that, to have that done. And of course, it's never been done. Now, Dad, Mom passed away December of 2017. Dad fell, he owns the scuba diving store downtown. He fell at the dive shop in March of 2018 and had a brain bleed. Spent a couple months in the hospital in St. Cloud, and I've been his Susan and I have been his 24/7 caregiver since March of 2018. So it's 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, we've been taking care of him. What he likes to do is, if I can get him to get outside, we'll walk around the block, and he bases it all on block stuff. He's been there forever, and that's what he does. My brother lives on the corner over on North 5th. Used to be Chalberg's house. I don't know his address, but that's one of Dad's things where we walk around the block, and he can always check on my brother Todd. It'd be the bottom right house on this side. Yeah, right where it said City of Brainerd. That's my brother Todd's house. He's the one that actually runs the dive shop since Dad can't do it anymore. So it's so important for him to be able to walk around the block and check on his other son when we're walking by there. And my question is, the sidewalk was replaced years ago and it's still perfect. I just don't understand, and he has issues with why it has to be tore up when it's already there. It just doesn't seem to make sense. I could see, if they had to replace it or there was some damage or something like that, maybe, but it's perfectly fine. And then it was the same with all the kids in the neighborhood. Chris has 3. People around the block on the corner have 2. There's another family that has 2, and there's another family that has 3, I believe. All those kids go, and of course our driveway is the turnaround spot because they go all the way around the block to our driveway, and that's where they turn around because there's no more sidewalk. So they can't go around the block without going out in the street. Now, taking him for a walk, if our sidewalk is removed, that means we go out the front sidewalk to the street and walk out of the corner to get to wherever we go. And that's the main drag to the front of the hospital, so traffic there is terrible. So I'm just asking, at least keep what's already there for his safety And for the kid's safety that's in the block, it's just important to us as a family that we get him out and get him his exercise. So
Absolutely.
that's all I have. Thank you so much for your time.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, so spent a lot of time on this project. So the block that we're concerned about is not the block that you're on, actually. It's the block south to that. That block there, and the idea of adding a sidewalk to it was shot down mainly because of the loss of vegetation. Basically, we'd have to strip cut that whole area there, and there's not a lot of room in there. We've been going through North Brainerd and looking at where does it make sense? Where does it make sense to extend the sidewalks? Where does it make sense to make sure that we have the connectivity to it? And I believe the thought process on your guys's was just simply that if we're not going to extend it, we should just remove it. But I have no problem with extending it down to the end of this block because there isn't a lot of obstructions. We were just simply avoiding this particular block here. In order to do that and simply just to have sidewalk on both streets, it didn't make sense. And we have a lot of areas in North where that kind of gets to that area. We actually walked all of the blocks and came up with a plan of where does it make sense? Where are the connections? Where are we going to lose vegetation? Where do we not have a full block? Like you guys are a great example of the block starts and then it just stops.
Yep.
And then in a lot of cases, it'll start the next block over, so we're just missing a chunk. Well, do we add that? Do we not add that? I have no problem with connecting your block there, and then just jettisoning over. But I don't think we want to fill in this block between Kingwood and Juniper.
So your input would be option 3, it looks like, where we would finish the southern half of that block and leave the existing sidewalk that's there.
Yep, and I do believe, we'd have to double check, but I do believe when we had our public meetings, we did have property owners from that Kingwood to Juniper block that had spoke against it as well. I may be wrong about that, but I believe that did happen.
And I was going to add to that, I have not spoke with anybody that does not have
Yep.
sidewalk today about their interest level or lack thereof of additional sidewalk. And you are correct, extending that half block that there is today would most likely, you'd have to remove about one mature tree, if I remember right.
If we haven't talked to the property owner to the south or even across the street, across Juniper, I don't know if we move forward on a decision whether it's both blocks or a single block yet today, but I think we at least can agree on leaving the sidewalk here, knowing that there's people that are using it a lot right now.
Yeah, and I apologize because I got a message for that other meeting, but he has good days and really, really bad days, and we couldn't get there.
That's okay. That's one of the biggest issues we have with this stuff.
And
is
then
just
we
trying
had
to
somebody
connect
come and
with
knock on our door and told us we were going to take your sidewalk. And we're like, what? Why? And he didn't know the answer. He just, well, that's what I was told. So that's where this confusion came in so I went over to Chris and I said, did you hear anything about them taking the sidewalk? He's like, no, what? So that's where this all came about.
Yeah, and I think this is a great example of when we have those meetings, the property owners with the sidewalk, if they're asking to keep the sidewalk, there's no reason for us to remove it.
No, it doesn't cost anything to anybody else.
Okay, thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Yeah, Chris, real quick, if you could.
One other thing I forgot to add, I understand Ivy's coming out. The hospital's going to get access to space for future possible enlargements or additions. And there's fiber, CTC fiber going into the hospital. So if the streets are out, what I'm wondering is if maybe there might be, I contacted CTC and asked them if they could bring fiber over from the hospital. And they said if there's any ARPA, we can't do it because the bill was, I think they were looking for a $12,000 contribution. They said we can't do it with our money, but maybe there's some ARPA money available for the city. So if you guys could think about that, that'd be really appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So, I guess knowing that we haven't spoke with the other property owners, and knowing what Mr. Bedell has just told us, I think we hold back on committing to extending south on that sidewalk, but
We can have a
I don't
conversation with that
really
next
know if we
owner.
need a motion, but I think we can assure you guys that we'll move forward without taking that sidewalk out, I think everybody'd be okay with that. Okay? Yeah, Mr. Beazer.
If I may. Can we pull up the street plan images that show the proposed run and the street, the landscaping condition in between the sidewalk and whatnot? I agree with what you're saying, Mike. I think we're in a good spot to kind of hold off on this, but before we do, I want to bring up a few things that I had been considering. Let's see, looking at option one, that's an issue that maintains status quo. It has the benefit of zero impact on the project cost. But reviewing the larger vicinity of the project area and the surrounding neighborhoods, we see this section as largely the anomaly. It's a loose patchwork of disconnected sidewalks. This approach really doesn't align with the city's comprehensive plan goals to increase its walkability profile, an aspect which has proven to have direct impacts on raising local real estate values, along with increasing individuals' likelihood to get out and walk more often. And this is information published by both National Association of City Transportation Officials along with Bureau of Transportation Statistics. Option 2 and 3 basically continue on with that patchwork approach. Option 4 creates the design consistent with most of the other blocks in this north neighborhood. The approach is also in alignment with health, exercise, walkability initiatives laid out in the comprehensive plan. And it closely resembles best practices for safer and complete streets. Lastly, sidewalks are a relatively low-cost investment with long lifespans, typically 25 years or more. So as this continues to be considered, let's keep these things in mind.
Absolutely.
If I could just toss in one more thing, I disagree with the idea that it's patchwork. The non-connecting of an entire block, I believe, is patchwork. But the idea that we have to have sidewalks on both sides of the street is not something that I'm willing to subscribe to. Having walked every block in North Brainerd last fall, I can tell you right now that there are a lot of blocks that are missing sidewalks on either one or both sides of the street. And it should be imperative of us as a city to ensure that the continuation of a pathway is there, but the crossing the street to continue down the path, I don't think needs to be something that is a complete barrier. If we get into a scenario where with utilities or with just the construction of driveways, sometimes it's just not feasible. So I accept that, yes, it's nice for uniformity, but at the same time, there are instances in which these things happen, and this was a great example. That block between Kingwood and Juniper, it essentially is the removal of 10 mature trees, most of which are very nice, and for a calming effect and for a speed reduction effect, which we've talked about on a regular basis, it's important that we have those trees lining that street. So
Yep,
I
those-
fully support the connection of the block, but I'm not a huge fan of the idea that everything has to always be uniform.
Okay.
Yeah, those other aspects of trees and maturity and how they calm and slow. Those are great
All right,
points.
guys. We have 6 minutes left and 3 items left. We're not going to take a motion on this one tonight. We've spoken about it for 15 minutes now. Let's move on. And Mr. Dean, Mr. Kramvik, could we put that on next week or 2 weeks' agenda? Revisit after speaking with those property owners?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
We got switched around here. We have a change order improvement 19-02 CLST extension, west segment project. Mr. Dean, go ahead and walk us through that one quick.
Yes, sir. So I'll keep this one pretty brief. Most of this change order is related to additional water main work, as well as a little bit of delays that were attributed to some leaking water main and water services. So most of this change order is in regards to that, which would be billed to BPU. The smaller portion of this is for white painted lane along the Cuyuna Lakes Trail extension on the west segment. This is kind of that area in 12th, Laurel, Norwood, in that neighborhood. So we're recommending installing a 4-inch white painted line along the trail to kind of differentiate where some of those transitions for driveways right by the curb are going to be. We really don't want people getting close where it kind of dips down and ties into the street. So the remaining 10 feet behind that is kind of where the usable trail proper would be. So this additional white line would be kind of precluding people from going in the area they probably shouldn't.
Thank you. Any questions? We have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the change order for the total amount of $8,355.41, noting the water-related items are to be billed to BPU.
Second, Erickson.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next, we have approval of downtown snow removal bids. Again, Mr. Dean, go ahead.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So this one's another kind of typical annual contract that's submitted out every year. We directly solicited to 5 different contractors. Only one contractor did submit a bid this time. Tom's Backhoe Service. They've done our downtown district for a handful of years now. Done a pretty good job. The costs associated are included in the memo based on the first 4-inch snow and then every inch after that. This is, in comparison to previous years, a 10% increase over last year's. Previous years have been 5%. I'm sure some of this is attributed to some of his inflation costs with fuel. But we are recommending the approval of the bid from Tom's Backhoe for the upcoming winter season for downtown.
Thank you. So we got one bid. So we have to motion whether or not we want to accept the one bid, even though it's 10% more and it used to increase 5% every year. So lesson is we need more bids. This is the one bid we have, so.
So I had one question. He already answered. I mean, I kind of imagined where that increase would be coming from. But with that, Mr. Chair, I'm recommending approval of the bid from Tom's Backhoe Service for the 2022-2023 downtown snow removal services in the downtown district.
And I so second.
Motion and a second. All right. Any more conversation? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Last item on here is active code enforcement direction. Mr. Kravik, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So staff is bringing 3 properties tonight to SPW for review. First property is 408 2nd Avenue Northeast for a damaged roof. So this property has been abated twice so far this year for grass. This we're now bringing because of the damaged roof. Darren did review this one, not enough to try to seek some type of warrant to search the property. So we are recommending sending a 10-day order correct letter and issuing a $300 citation every 30 days until November 1st, which would be essentially one more citation.
Thank you.
Next property is 1218 Quinn Street. So this property has received 3 citations for their fence repair. They have contacted staff, having difficulty trying to get this repaired, but there has been complaints on it. Staff is recommending on this one sending a 20-day order to correct letter for repair of the fence or proof that a contract has been signed for repair, and then begin working with the city attorney for abatement of the fence.
Thank you.
Next property is 710 9th Street North. So this property has received their notice of violation along with 3 citations for grass. Staff is recommending abating of the long grass immediately.
Excellent. That concludes all 3 properties. Any questions about these properties or citations?
I make a motion to approve following staff recommendations for each case cited.
Second.
Motion and a second. I have no more discussion. Anybody have more discussion? Hearing none. Go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Sorry, Brian, I don't think we have time for public comment before this, but we will have a public forum if you want to stay for that at the end of the council meeting. But we are adjourned to the council meeting.